get started. My name is Michael McMaster. I work in the building that you see, the Wood County Museum. If you might recall, the Wood County Museum was the old county home, and that magnolia tree in the courtyard on a good spring day might start blooming soon and be quite beautiful once again. This virtual history series is brought to you by a donation from Edwin and Irma Wolf. If you would like to become a sponsor of the many education programs for students and adults, you can contact me at the Wood County Museum. This program is the history of Wood County by the way of the life of Charles Evers. It is not the entire history of Wood County. We could start that in 10,000 BC. This is the history of Wood County through the life and experiences of Charles Evers. This is part one. It will talk about his parents, maternal grandmother, all the way through his participation in the Civil War. Part two, a little bit longer than this program. There is nothing that happened of any significance in Wood County that Charles Evers didn't claim was his own brainchild. So if you can, next month, stay tuned for part two. I guarantee you'll get a chuckle and find it amusing and informative. Now, Charles White Evers was born in a cabin along the Maumee River in Wood County in 1837. He grew up in Plain Township at the end of the pioneering days of the Great Black Swamp. Evers is best remembered as being a newspaperman and also the author of the Pioneer Scrapbook of Wood County, which was published after his death in 1910. The image you see might well have been Charles Evers listening around the fire to the old timers, the original pioneers of Wood County. Charles Evers listened carefully and later in life was a great storyteller. Now, on March 30th, 1835, Charles Evers' parents, John Evers and Celinda White, were married in Wood County, Ohio. It is interesting to note that who signed their entry into the marriage license book was a man called Uncle Guy Nearing. He was a justice of the peace and came to Perrysburg in 1817. The Indians called him Big Nawash. Charles Evers writes about Guy Nearing extensively in the Pioneer Scrapbook. Evers describes him as a man of gigantic stature and strength, broad-shouldered and bony. He scarcely knew his own strength, and his power of endurance was something wonderful. He was a sort of local Hercules of that day and a terror to the Indians, great and small. And he was inherently loved and trusted by his fellow man. Now, Guy Nearing and associates were the ones to move the county jail from Maumee, which was part of Wood County, to the county seat in Perrysburg in 1824. Guy Nearing also had a hand in building the very first Wood County courthouse in 1826 in Perrysburg. Nearing also built a section of the Maumee and Western Reserve Pike, which is State Route 20 today. And Guy Nearing became a commissioner in Wood County in 1834. Now, Charles Evers was a great storyteller and makes Guy Nearing into something of a folk hero. He describes Uncle Guy Nearing's death at Providence, Ohio, at the hands of 7 Irishmen armed with clubs. Nearing whipped 5 of them, but had 7 of his ribs dislocated from his backbone, from which he died about a year after of fever in 1840. We know that the town of Providence is no longer there, devastated by the cholera epidemic of its time. Charles Evers would have only been 3 years old when this happened. Obviously, he had heard these stories growing up from his father and his neighbor, Neptune Nearing, the son of Guy Nearing. He never knew Guy Nearing, but he had heard the stories and turned him into a folk hero. Now, Charles Evers' mother, Celinda White, her father was Johnson White, who was a pioneering ferryman between Waterville and Miltonville, Ohio. White also served as one of the judges in the very first elections in Middleton Township, Wood County in 1832. Miltonville was surveyed in 1835 by no other than Uncle Guy Nearing. His tavern was also there with a rope ferry connecting the town with the north shore of the Maumee River. An interesting photograph, William Fowler and Milton Baird built a dam on the Maumee River at Miltonville and erected a sawmill. That arrow on the left very well could have been the remnants of that dam at Miltonville, which ran the sawmill. And as we know, Miltonville is a ghost town today. Interesting also, Charles Evers' paternal grandmother, his father's mother, in her childhood had been taken captive by the Indians with whom she lived for 7 years. This occurred in Western Pennsylvania. Although Charles never met his grandmother, he most likely heard his father talk of her experiences. Now, Charles Evers states that at the age of 13, his grandmother ran away from the Native Americans to escape an abhorrent marriage with the chief's son, whom she disliked. With all the hardships she endured in common with the Indians while in captivity, they treated her kindly, and she always had a sympathetic word for them. After she came west, her house was a great resort for them because she fed them and could talk with them in both word and sign language. Now, Charles Evers' father, John, after the death of his mother, moved with his family from Western Pennsylvania to Wayne County, Ohio, and there is the public square at about that time. John Evers was an apprentice to be a carpenter and cabinet maker. In 1835, John moved to Maumee, which was the year Lucas County was formed from a portion of Wood County. Now, Charles Evers was born in the town of Miltonville on July 22nd, 1837. A few years later, his father, John, moved his family to Section 34 of Plain Township, Wood County, and he purchased a 40-acre tract of land. Now, it just so happened that Charles Evers and his father John bought that land from Neptune Nearing, the son of Uncle Guy Nearing. Neptune Nearing was also, like Charles' father, a cabinet maker by trade, but spent most of his time parceling his late father's land contracts. And Charles Evers must have heard Neptune Nearing and his father John Evers talk about the pioneering days many years before Charles Evers' time. Now, Charles Evers grew up in section of 34 of Plain Township. His notable neighbors included the Indian missionary Reverend Isaac Van Tassel and his wife, Lucia Badger Van Tassel. When the Reverend died in 1847, young Charles Evers was about 12 years old. You can imagine young Charles Evers sitting at the fireplace of Isaac Van Tassel, hearing the stories of the Indian Mission School. Now, Reverend Isaac Van Tassel's wife, Lucia Badger, her father was also an influential minister. It is quite possible that young Charles Evers also knew Reverend Isaac Van Tassel's father-in-law, the Reverend Joseph Badger of Perrysburg. When the Reverend Badger died in 1846 at the age of 90, Charles Evers would have been about 10 years old. Perhaps Charles Evers traveled to Perrysburg to listen to the stories of the elder Reverend Badger. Reverend Badger would have had many stories to tell. Reverend Badger was born in Massachusetts in 1757, and at the age of 18, Badger fought the British at the Battle of what we call Bunker Hill in 1775, the Battle of Cobble Hill in Brooklyn, 1776, and he crossed the Delaware River with General Washington in 1777. The stories Reverend Badger must have told. Charles Evers describes Reverend Badger, even though he would have been a boy about 9 years old, as a man of deep piety, greatly respected by all, kind and generous, was never known to refuse a favor, and would render assistance to an Indian or even a dog. He was, on principle, opposed to hunting on the Sabbath. Hardy but careless pioneers, if they chanced to pass near his house on the Sabbath to hunt, always, as a matter of respect of his feelings, would leave the road and go around the house in the woods, and thus escape his observation and perhaps his scolding of the hunters. Evers gives us many stories of the Great Black Swamp. When Charles Evers was 14, the Great Black Swamp was beginning to be drained, but large portions of it still existed. In 1851, the story of the notorious Stoga Hole in Liberty Township, through the stories of his elder brother and young Nathaniel Badger, rescuing young girls from that Stoga Hole. The arrow to the star points at about where Charles Evers lived. His older brother and the young Nathaniel Badger traveled to that Stoga Hole rescuing people. He also gave us the description and origin of the name Devil's Hole. The story most likely came from Reverend Joseph Badger, who came through Wood County during the War of 1812. Now, In 1840s, Charles Evers as a child must have also explored the hill known as Shutnock. The legend Evers spins in his pioneer scrapbook years later came from his neighbor, Isaac Van Tassel. That arrow points to section 29 of Plain Township, very close to where Evers grew up. Notice it is a hill with a name called Shutnock. In this atlas of Wood County, it is the only geographic feature other than a river with a name well known. In the 1850s, as a student in the 1840s, Charles Evers attended District 2 in Plain Township. In the 1850s, Charles is employed as a teacher in Plain Township. He most likely taught in a small log schoolhouse. Charles Evers begins his pioneer scrapbook with a poem that recalls the days of his childhood. He said, "Give me back the dear old days, the pathways through the dells, to the schoolhouse in the blossoms, the sound of far-off bells, tinkling across the meadow, the song of bird and brook, the old-time dictionary and blue-black spelling book." Charles Evers was a romantic storyteller, reminiscent of things in his life and even things that happened before his life. In 1856, Charles Evers left Plain Township and headed to Kansas to secure government land for a farm of his own. While on that trip, Evers changed his mind and went to Minnesota to collect a loan from a man he had located there. Maybe he had skipped out on his loan. Charles Evers was also interested in money. In 1859, Charles Evers returned to Ohio to attend school. In 1859, Charles Evers attended Oberlin College, shown there. His studies ended at the start of the Civil War when he enlisted in 1861. Even though Charles Evers was from Wood County, from Ohio, he did not join an Ohio regiment. In 1861, Charles Evers enlisted in Company H of the 2nd Kentucky Volunteer Infantry Regiment, which was formed near Cincinnati, Ohio. In April 6th through the 7th, 1862, Evers and his regiment took part in the Battle of Shiloh, which was the bloodiest battle of the Civil War up to that point. Charles Evers takes pride in his service. One of the things Mr. Evers takes pride in is the fact that he carried his musket faithfully and never missed a march or battle of his regiment until wounded and captured at the Battle of Chickamauga, September 19th, 1863. This ended his service. His brother, John Evers, was killed at Cedar Mountain, Virginia on the 9th of August, 1862. Now, Charles Evers was imprisoned in Richmond, Virginia. Fortunately for him, he was pardoned. In November 1862, he was transferred back to the Union in the United States Hospital at Annapolis, Maryland, just in time to seek treatment for his battle wound, his injured leg, and prevent it from being amputated. He was mustered out of the Army on June 1864 as a wounded soldier. As you can see, the life of Charles Evers was full of famous historical figures of Wood County and notable dates and places of Wood County. In 1909, Charles Evers died. His remains were brought to Bowling Green from the interurban car and taken to the Evers blocks. He is interred in Oak Grove Cemetery in Bowling Green. Now, next month is part 2. It's his tenure as sheriff to his death. You will find it interesting and amusing. This is the last slide I have. Every Friday on our Facebook page, I post a history series. Our Facebook page is always updated. Our website at woodcountyhistory.org always is updated. The Wood County Museum is open 7 days a week during business hours, Monday through Friday, 10 to 4, Saturday and Sunday, 1 to 4. The admission is for adults, seniors, students, and veterans, $3 for kids 6 to 12. On exhibit now, on the left is people, places, and things, thousands of photos from Wood County. On the right, for comfort and convenience, the history of Ohio poor farms. You can see the ruins of a southern Wood County or a southern Ohio County poor farm above. Many interesting photos. Also on permanent exhibit is the Mary and Carlbach exhibit with more information that you have ever known about this notorious murder and execution. If you remember, the stairs at the county home are very steep. We now have an elevator beside the spacious handicap parking behind the building, well marked. Short trip takes you to the large elevator to the first and second floors of the museum. So if you have people who can't climb the stairs, please bring them through the elevator. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Holly, you can do your thing. I hope everybody could hear me okay. And you're still muted, Holly.
Thank you, Mike.
Holly, are you still there? You're frozen up, I think. Anyone who might be unmuted or could unmute themselves, is there any questions about this program? I sincerely hope the images were captivating and you could hear me well.
Mike?
Yes.
Frank Butwin.
Yes.
Since Charles Evers went to Oberlin College, was he therefore a strong abolitionist? I put this in the chat also.
Yeah, since he was from Northwest Ohio, Oberlin was the hotbed of abolitionism in this entire region. I would say he probably was heavily influenced by the abolitionist movement. He never personally states he was, but we can infer that most likely he was. Holly, are you still muted? I hope sincerely you can hear me. Marshall Smith, did you have a question?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
My great-grandfather, Joshua Vance Smith, was in Wood County about the same time that Evers was. And I'm interested in Evers' writings. Are they available online or are they only in
every library in Wood County most likely has a copy of the Pioneer Scrapbook of Wood County. Now, this book was written after Charles Evers had died. It was compiled by a fellow newspaperman in Toledo from Evers' notes. Charles Evers also wrote the first 11 pages of the biographical record of Wood County, Ohio, the Beers book,